Good morning. I'm Frank Farmer. Today is June the 5th, 2023. We are here today as part of the Veterans History Project. This is a project authorized by Congress and administered by the Library of Congress. The objective is to interview and video as many as possible the stories of those veterans from World War II to the present. The Library of Congress archives these and makes them available to the public both in person and online. The library also encourages local venues such as historical societies and museums like the one we're in today, the New Smyrna Museum of History, to house these and make them available to the local population. Today we have with us a veteran of the United States Army, served over 24 years in the Army, served in two branches of the United States Army, the Armored Branch and the Signal Corps. So let me welcome Lieutenant Colonel Peter Satterlee. Colonel Satterlee, thank you very much for showing up here today and be willing to share your story.
Well, thank you for having me, Frank.
Thank you. Now, as I understand it, you live here in New Smyrna Beach, Florida. You've lived here for a number of years, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But where did you grow up? Where's your hometown?
Well, I was born in Mount Vernon, New York, but at about 6 weeks old, I convinced my mother to move to Miami. And so I grew up in Miami.
You grew up in Miami. You go to the local high schools down in Miami, I assume.
Palmetto Senior High School is where I graduated from in South.
And what year did you graduate from high school?
1965. That makes me pretty old.
Well, we're all kind of pretty old. 1965, that was the Vietnam War was going on, but it was just starting to heat up at that time. Was Vietnam on your mind when you graduated from high school in 1965?
Best of my recollection, no. I didn't really pay that much attention to it. I was very much into diving as both avocation and partial vocation, and I guess I just didn't pay it much attention.
So did you plan on going into the military when you graduated from high school?
No, I didn't.
You had other things in mind.
Yes, I did.
Now, you mentioned scuba diving, and you used that scuba diving to kind of go on a life of adventure there when you were 18 years old, did you not?
Well, at 18, all of life is an adventure, but yes, I didn't really participate in any extracurricular activities in school. I was always in the water. I ended up, while still in high school, actually capturing tropical fish and selling them to pet stores and all. And I had aspirations upon graduation of attending a hard hat diving school to become a professional deep water diver.
So your ambition when you graduated from high school was to become a hard hat diver.
Right.
And you had already started, obviously, on that career. You said you caught fish.
Right.
And where did you catch the fish? Off the coast of Florida, off Miami?
Off of Miami. I had a small outboard and go across Biscayne Bay to Fowey Rocks or one of the reefs off Miami.
And you caught exotic fish and sold them to aquarium.
Right. I know you've never heard of something called a slurp gun.
I have not.
A slurp gun is basically a clear acrylic plastic device like a big syringe where you suck up water, and so you swim around the reef looking for the kind of tropical fish that you want. You put the gun close to them and suck them into the chamber.
So they're caught live, obviously, because you're going to sell them for aquarium.
Too small to eat.
Okay, so And I didn't realize there was a number of exotic fish off the coast of Florida. I thought that was all down further south,
or in the Philippines or someplace. Yeah,
but they were right there.
Yeah.
Now you also got involved in treasure hunting. I think you told me. Is that right?
Yes, I graduated high school out of summer school. I was a really stellar high school student, and fortuitously saw an ad in the Miami Herald about a company that had come to the U.S. from the Bahamas on a recruitment effort to get some replacement divers. And I went, obviously, for the interview in Miami Beach. They had a hotel room there where they were doing the interviews. And learned probably my first big life lesson, and that is persistence. Because here I was, a high school graduate, young kid, trying to pass myself off as a salvage diver to break into the field. And of course, they kind of laughed me off in the beginning until they got so tired of hearing me call them and find out the status of the interview. They finally just hired me and took me to the Bahamas with their diving recruitment.
And their mission was they were searching for Spanish silver and gold.
Yes, they had the sole license from the Bahamian government for the island of Grand Bahama to do the salvage work for the Spanish fleet that went down in the hurricanes in, I guess, the 1700s. And they had an active excavation going on, and were doing a replenishment of divers, and I got hired to go over there and do it.
Did you find any gold and silver?
Well, found silver, went over there, and we were excavating during the hurricane season. It was a year-round operation, and a major hurricane came through the Bahamas while we were there, and basically ended up covering up everything that had been excavated at that time. We're kind of at the tail end of that particular ship, but had identified 2 or 3 more just within swimming distance of this particular one. So the company decided to call a halt to its salvage operation until hurricane season was over, and let the crew go until January. I shipped my motorcycle back over and took off for a trip to Kansas, and was planning to go back in January and start salvage operations again. But no, Frank, I didn't bring up any gold. I brought up silver. We're, as I say, at the tail end of this excavation, so a lot of the treasure, the coins and silver, had been brought up before, and I believe they found a little bit of gold, but it was almost all silver.
But that was, when that ended, that was the end of your treasure hunting
yes,
career.
It was.
And that was, you had graduated in 65, you told me.
Correct.
And so was this now 1966, 67?
It was the end of 65, actually.
And
so I only was on the job for probably 4 or 5 months.
Now, when did you decide to go into the military?
Well, I didn't decide. They kind of decided for me. They wanted me to change silver to green with a draft notice sent via the mail. So, again, I didn't have a whole lot of choice in the matter.
So again, this was 65. Vietnam was the first big battle, big set battle had been fought. The Ia Drang Valley. It was in January of 1966, but it was still getting pretty hot in 65, and so So you were drafted, or did you go enlist, or did you just say, I'm drafted, I'm off to boot camp?
Well, my mother sent me the draft notice. As I say, I'd hopped on my bike and went to Kansas. Whole different story. And got the draft notice that was forwarded to me, so I had to go back down to Coral Gables to the induction center. And when I got down there, I decided, well, I'm going to be smart. I'm a diver. I want to go and pursue this career in the military. So I contacted the Navy and the Coast Guard to get into diving in the service. And they said, yeah, sure, son, join for 4 years. And after 2 years, you can then apply, and we'll see if we accept you into the diving program. Well, that didn't sound like a great deal. So some silver-tongued Army recruiter talked me into enlisting instead of being drafted, where I could get my choice. And as I say, silver-tongued, he talked me into enlisting for infantry unassigned, exactly what I would have been if I'd been drafted. But he got an extra year out of me that way.
So you got 1965, you're now in the Army. Where did you go for your basic training?
Well, it was actually 66 by the time I enlisted, and went to Fort Benning, Georgia, infantry basic training. And from there, I was sent to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, for advanced infantry training.
And so was at that point was Vietnam on your mind at that point?
I can't say it was forefront. I'm sure, being in the military, being in the Army at that point, that we were well indoctrinated into Vietnam. I mean, after all, that's what the draft was for. So I'm sure it was a prevalent topic. It just never really registered into memory.
So you went to AIT, you've gone through your basic training, you're going to be infantry. What happened after your AIT training?
Well,
AIT being advanced
infantry training. Obviously, the Army gives a whole battery of tests during your basic training, and one of those was the OCS test, Officer Candidate School test. And I must have passed the bar and was selected to attend OCS. The Army typically gives you your choice, and your choice for OCS branch was basically every branch in the Army. You just had to rank them as to desirability, 1 through whatever it was, 10. And they selected me for armor OCS. And I questioned them, armor? I don't even recall selecting armor. And they said, oh, yes, it was, number 4, 5, or 6 on your choice. Well, I had to rank them all, so, all of them were my choice to some degree. But anyway, they selected me for armor OCS.
Now, you had only a high school degree at that time, is that correct?
Yes.
You had no college?
No.
No college. So you were, and where did you go for your OCS school?
Well, I had to wait for the next available class, and so out of AIT, they put me OJTing, on the job training, in military police. So I was assigned to the military police unit at Fort Jackson until I could get my class date. And then I got the date, went to Fort Knox, Kentucky for armor OCS, which I guess at that point was a 6-month course, I believe.
So you graduated from that, and you're now a second lieutenant armor officer, and that had put us up to 1967 in there?
About that, yeah.
Okay. And what did they tell you that you were going to be doing after you finished OCS?
Well, that's probably when Vietnam became a bigger awareness or issue, because, of course, in OCS, it was very heavily oriented toward Vietnam. However, when you think about it, armor is not a great suitable branch for jungles and swamps. So we as class and classmates felt our chance of assignment to Germany or somewhere in Europe would be a much higher probability than Vietnam. So anyway, I got assigned to the 4th Battalion, 69th Armor at Fort Benning, Georgia, in support of the infantry school. I became a tank commander, or a platoon commander.
And how long was that assignment?
Well, it was actually going to be my duration of obligation, but I was a tank platoon leader for about a year, and then
At Fort Benning.
And then became the Armored Battalion's battalion communications officer. That position at that time in the Army, like all combat arms, was what was called branch and material. In other words, it wasn't a signal corps position, it was a branch position. So armor officers filled the communications position, armor battalions, infantry and infantry battalions, etc. During that time, I was the battalion communications officer, which was about a year. The Signal Corps had talked the Department of the Army into assuming responsibility for all communications positions in the combat arms. Consequently, it went from a branch of material to a branch material position, and the Signal Corps was out seeking officers to branch transfer.
So is that when you became a Signal Corps officer?
Yes, it was about the same time I was somewhat approaching my end of obligation to serve. And
Which was 3 years, is that correct?
Which was 3 years. And I was assessing my life and saying, I'm still just a high school graduate. I can drive 52 tons of homogeneous steel. So what would I do if I got out? And besides being a heavy equipment operator, I really didn't have a lot of prospects. So I went down to the operations branch and checked out the formal school catalog of the Army, which is about 4 inches thick, of all the schools the Army offers. And I went through the formal school catalog looking for the longest, most complex school I could find that the Army offered, figuring, hey, let me learn a profession, let me learn a career that I can use outside. And the schools happened to be Chemical Corps and Signal Corps related, and I didn't have much interest in Chemical Corps, so I chose Signal and the 2 longest schools, which were 6-month schools. And so I put in a branch transfer request, personal action request, somewhat contingent upon getting one of those 2 Signal Corps schools. And at that time, they decided to grant such a conditional request.
So is that when you formally transferred over to the Signal
Yes.
Corps? Now, what was this 6-month-long school? What was that?
Well, I had to give them 2 choices, and so I gave them the Radio Systems Officer course, which is strategic communications, long-range communications, because I wanted to get out of tactical communications. And the other one was wire integration, where you ran switchboards and wire type communications. So I got the radio systems course, which is the one I had wanted.
And where was that school?
Fort Monmouth, New Jersey.
You spent 6 months there.
6 months, but the Army had plans. They sent me to the school, TDY, temporary duty, with my final assignment, Vietnam. So they saw me coming.
And when did you get to Vietnam?
Well, I went directly with 2 weeks of leave, I guess, out of the school into Vietnam, and I got there July of '69, I believe.
July of '69, of course. Not only was the war heating up, but things in the United States were also heating up. The protests were getting louder. The casualties were mounting up. So you obviously went at a particular time in our nation's history that had the protests, that had casualties. And where were you assigned when you?
Well, I was sent there unassigned, went to the replacement battalion, and they looked at my background and said, "Oh, armor." And I said, "No, you're looking at the wrong, that's cross signals, cross flags. I'm Signal Corps, not armor." And they said, "Armor. We're sending you to An Khê," which was the headquarters of the 4th Battalion, 60th Artillery, which happened to be twin 40-millimeter anti-aircraft cannons mounted on a tank chassis, an M42 tank chassis, so armor.
So you went from originally an armor officer, then a Signal Corps officer, went to a 6-month school, they sent you to Vietnam, and here you are now performing as an armor officer again. Is that correct?
That's correct. And what is so ironical is that the Signal Corps specialty I picked up of strategic communications was the most critical Signal Corps specialty in Vietnam. And that, I guess, didn't matter. They needed somebody in that armor.
That wasn't you in that critical
Right.
critical slot. Is that right? Now, when you got, what part of Vietnam were you assigned to?
I was base camped out of what's called Camp Radcliffe, which is An Khê. We always refer to it just as An Khê. But the battalion operated throughout 2 Corps. Our main battalion headquarters was at An Khê. We had a large segment at Pleiku and Tuy Hoa, and overall in 2 Corps we had up to 50 locations throughout 2 Corps that we.
Now, what was your basic mission?
Battalion communications officer, the same thing that I was back then in armor. It was to provide communications support for the scattered elements of the 4th of the 60th in FM communications, which are tactical short-range communications, and AM single sideband, where we talk to our units that were dispersed beyond FM range.
Now, is that I Corps or 2 Corps?
2 Corps.
2 Corps. For the viewers, of South Vietnam was divided up into 4 Corps. I Corps was the one that was the northernmost of South Vietnam, and 4 Corps was down in the Mekong Delta. 2 Corps was just a little south of I Corps when you were there. So now, when you were there, were you mainly at a base camp, a large base camp that you operated out of?
Yes, I think Camp Radcliffe, I had read, was the largest helicopter base in the world. It started out with different units in its history. The 4th of 60 was a minor element at An Khê. We, of course, had our sector of responsibility, but my job primarily was operating out of An Khê, but traveling to the different locations to make sure the communication support was
So,
adequate.
so most of the time you did have a bunk to sleep in,
Yes.
and you had hot food most of the time, I assume. Did your unit come under any fire from the VC or the North Vietnamese?
Periodically, we did. We had one major incursion. I think it was in late '69, around November timeframe, where our sector of the perimeter got breached, and we had sappers across the base. And I think that An-K lost about 20, 25 helicopters being blown up, and I was just about ready to pull the pins on my phosphorus grenades to destroy my crypto equipment.
They were that close.
Yeah.
So,
But I have to say, we had a hot bunk. Not a hot bunk, really. We didn't trade bunks, but we had hot food and a warm bunk in a civilized environment most
now
of the time.
you brought up the idea that you, of course, were responsible for some pretty top secret crypto machines and so forth, and I assume, as you've just alluded to, that you had orders. If it was about to get overrun or captured, you were going to destroy that.
Right,
Is that
yeah.
right? That
Yeah,
was
we had to.
do. Now, did your unit? I know that you had some breaches in the fence and people getting in. Did your unit suffer any personal casualties?
No, we did not. The objective was really the unit, and unfortunately, I don't remember the designation, but it was the main helicopter unit on An-K. That was the objective of the attack, which was located right next to us. We shared the compound border with them.
Now, in Vietnam, there were several defensive maneuvers or alignments that went on, and of course, having a aircraft above you was a pretty comforting thing. I remember in Vietnam there was a aircraft, a C-130, that would often had a nickname called Puff the Magic Dragon. I understand that you at least saw Puff the Magic Dragon in action at one time, did you not?
Yes, it was that same attack where we were able to call Puff in. And since I had the radios and the control of the communications with Puff, I ended up vectoring Puff in and communicating with Puff.
Well, tell us where the nickname Puff the Magic Dragon
Well,
came in.
you know, I looked that up once, and there's probably lots of stories as to why Puff was named Puff. But the one that struck the most amusement in me is that the Viet Cong had never seen an aerial attack of that magnitude from the sky, and so they thought it was a dragon spewing fire, and consequently it became known as Puff, the Magic Dragon.
Well, again, for the viewers' sake, those C-130s had essentially Gatling guns mounted on the sides of them that could spew out thousands of rounds a minute, every 6-1 being a tracer, but it came out so fast, it looked like a solid line of fire.
It looked
from the plane to the ground.
Right, it looked like a laser. Puff C-130, like you said, in the beginning, they changed armament a number of times, but in the beginning they had 3 miniguns, Gatling guns, located out their port side. And what they do is they would fly in a circle at about 120 knots and cover the area that you vectored them into. And it was said that within 10 seconds of firing, the magnitude of the fire was such that in 10 seconds they could cover a bullet in one square yard the size of a football field. So every yard within a football field area could be fired on within 10 seconds. I mean, just phenomenal. It was like a laser light just going down.
Well, that's pretty comforting. If you're the one that's got the plane circling around you protecting you, it's a little devastating if you're the person they're firing at to do that.
You just hope that in that one square yard, you're in the corner of it.
Now, what was your opinion of the North Vietnamese troops and the Viet Cong troops as opponents, as military?
Very dedicated. Why they were dedicated, I can only presume that they were defending their homeland. This was our first major counterinsurgency or guerrilla war. And in my opinion, we were very unprepared for it and not as devoted into accomplishing it.
Now, you carried your own personal sidearms, did you not?
Right.
What weapons did you carry?
Well, my daily weapon was a .45, and when I was on the road or in the air, a M16 with it.
Okay. And what are your views of those weapons as?
Oh, I went out and bought myself a .45 as soon as I got back to the States.
So you liked them?
I love it. And we became very good at it because we constantly practiced with it. I remember one instance where I was shooting right outside the wire with a colleague, and we just kept a tin can floating, with it. I mean, we became pretty good with .45.
Now, how long were you in Vietnam?
13 months.
And then you were going to be rotated back to the United States.
Right.
And what happened after that?
Well, I got to kind of back you up a touch. I had learned of a program the military had called the Officer Undergraduate Degree Program, what came out of the old bootstrap program, which was the Army sending you for 2 years full-time to a college, as long as you were able to complete that 4-year degree within 2 years. And so having learned of that when I was at Fort Monmouth, I started taking some night courses to build up credit hours to be able to reach that magic 2 years and 4.
So when you left Vietnam, how long did it take you to build up those 2 years of credit?
Well, actually, I started when I was at Fort Monmouth. When I was in Vietnam, I was taking correspondence courses. They also gave you credit for life experience, the kind of training that you had in the military that would equate.
Well, that sounds like that ought to be about a PhD degree.
While in Vietnam and while taking the courses, I went ahead and applied via the Army for the OUDP program. And one of the requirements was that the college that you're applying to has to verify that you can meet the graduation requirements within 2 years. And the field of study has to be something that your branch needs, such as in the Signal Corps electrical engineering, as an example. So while in Vietnam, I went ahead and applied to a couple of different colleges and initially applied for the field of electrical engineering. Having received those letters from the colleges acknowledging I could complete the degree requirements in 2 years, I then officially applied to the Army while in Vietnam and got accepted to the program, where when I rotated out of Vietnam, I went into the 1-year advanced Signal Corps officer course prior to going to the college of my choice.
Waiting for your entrance into the college.
Correct.
All right. So that was, what year did you leave Vietnam?
Would have been, I guess, around August, September of 70.
70. So you came back home, you did a year of advanced training in Signal Corps type thing, and then you had gotten accepted to a college, is that correct?
Right.
And which college was that?
It was the University of Miami. While waiting for the advanced course, the one-year advanced course, I was also able to get the pinnacle of strategic communications courses called the Satellite Officer course, which at that time there were probably maybe 25 satellite officers in the Army, in the Army. So I kind of achieved the pinnacle training that I was looking for to become the specialist within the field, and then the one-year advanced course, then down to the University of Miami, where I had gotten the Army to agree to transfer my major from electrical engineering to radio and television, mass communications. Electrical engineering frightened me because, again, I'm a high school graduate out of summer school, and math, I took 3 years of algebra in high school. It was all Algebra 1 because it took me 3 years to get out of it. So electrical engineering just kind of petrified me.
So you became a student at the University of Miami while on active duty, the United States Army. Did they require you to wear a uniform while you were attending school?
Not at all. I wore a uniform a couple of times on award ceremonies, but no, I was known as Army because of my haircut, if nothing else. I had to maintain military appearance. But no, I did not wear the uniform to class.
And when did you graduate from the University of Miami?
72, I believe it was.
So here you have a bachelor's degree from the University of Miami. Your rank at that time was? Captain. And you would spend an additional almost 20 more years in the Army after. What were some of your assignments? Here you have a college degree now in some specialized studies. What were your assignments? Some of your assignments, because you spent, as I said, over 24 years in the Army total. Where did they send you when you got your degree?
Well, you have to realize this is the Army we're talking about. Graduate out of the University of Miami, radio and television, and the assignment officer wants to assign me to an Armored Battalion in Germany as a battalion communications officer. So I just thought that was kind of a waste. So I looked up and found who the commander of the Armed Forces Radio and Television Services network in Germany was, the Army network. It was AFN Europe. And was able to call him and get a hold of him, explain myself and my situation, and that I wanted to work in the field I just graduated from. And so he said, yeah, sounds good to him. He'll work it from his end, and I should work the assignment from my end. And so it worked, and I got assigned to AFN Europe as potentially the officer in charge of the radio station in Frankfurt, Germany. I got over there and immediately was reassigned to Ramstein Air Force Base to take over the transition from Air Force to Army control of the television network. Department of Defense has a policy that whoever has the largest audience has to have control of the facility. And so I went down to Germany, Ramstein Air Force Base, and took over the transition and control of television.
And you spent the rest of your Army career then as a Signal Corps officer with a very specialized training in various.
Yes, from then on, it was my goal to be the radio and television officer in the Army. And so I did the transition and ran television in Germany for 2 years. The Department of Defense directed the Army to take over the various services, radio stations in Italy, and network them together and build a color television station in Italy. And so they reassigned me to Vicenza, Italy, to do that. After I put television on the air in Italy, I went to the Training and Doctrine Command for the Army in Virginia and took over the responsibility of the 21 television production facilities for the Army training mission. From there, I went to Panama and took over the Southern Command network of radio and television and a satellite receiver facility, which I ran for 3.5 years, 3 years, 3 months.
So you were in a very technical position most of the time. So what do you think about the technology we have today, Colonel? With
it's phenomenal. I was just discussing what you can do on a computer, laptop computer, on a boat in the middle of the ocean for post-production and completion of television programs surpasses my largest facility that I ever worked at.
Your story should be an inspiration to a number of people going into the military. You went in with a high school education. You came out with a college degree. The last 2 years, the United States Army paid for you to go to school. And of course, you had to have certain standards you had to pass, and you had, which you did, and then went on to these very technical jobs. So I think you're an inspiration, Colonel. And one thing I did not mention, and I want to mention, during those 24 years, you've been decorated numerous times. You're the holder of a Bronze Star. You have a Air Medal. You have an Army Commendation Medal. You have a Defense Meritorious Service Medal, among others. So, the Colonel, I think that people that are watching us today can just take heart in your story. And of course, you as an individual took advantage of that and produced it, of course. But the United States Army gave you the opportunity to do that. Now, I do want to mention that you got out of the Army, I said, after 24 years. How did you get to New Smyrna Beach, Florida?
Sailed.
You sailed out. which reminds me, you went back to your adventurous days before you went in the Army. And speaking of sailing, didn't you take a trip for 2 years sailing?
Right. We, upon retirement, we had owned boats pretty much the whole time. I was the speck of blue in the sea of green in the Army in avocational hobbies of sailing. And upon retirement in February 1990, my wife and I and our cat got aboard our 46-foot ketch and took off for 2 years to circumnavigate the Caribbean.
And you did that. You circumnavigated the Caribbean.
Right.
Did you ever run into storms and things of that nature?
Anytime you leave a port for more than 3 days, you're at the mercy of the weather. And so certainly on some uncomfortable weather, but fortunately no major storms.
Didn't run any pirates, did you?
Oh, that's a whole nother story, Frank. But on that trip, no.
So then you officially retired, and you've been living here in the New Smyrna Beach area for how long now, sir?
Well, we bought a house in '87 prior, 86, 87, prior to retirement, because we wanted to live on the water and were afraid that waterfront prices would only keep going up. So
Which they have.
Yeah, which they, especially now. So we bought a house in 87, but put under rent when we retired, and again with the plans to sail around for a while. We sailed down here to New Smyrna. The house was between renters, and so we were able to dock at it and do some renovation to the house, and then took off to the Caribbean.
You still have a boat now?
No, we've gone through, I'd have to count, but probably half a dozen to 10 boats since then. We finally transitioned, like all old sailors do, from sail to power. We went into trawlers. And for the last 10 years of boating, we bought a Dutch steel motor cruiser in Europe and would cruise the canals and rivers of Europe for those next 10 years, spending 3 to 5 months a year cruising. We sold that about 2 or 3 years ago and are boatless.
Colonel, I'm going to ask you a question that I ask all Vietnam veterans. Looking back on Vietnam with 50 years of hindsight now, what do you think the United States did right, or what do you think the United States did wrong in regard to Vietnam?
Well, I think the thing we did right was a byproduct of the time, and that is we exposed well over 1.5 million Americans to the military. Most of them through draft, but regardless. And in that taught these 1.5 million Americans what was good about the Army. Of course, what was bad also. And these 1.5 million plus members went on into society carrying the values that they learned in the military, whether that was working as a productive member of society, to Congress, to presidents. And in the mid-70s, something like 80% of your Congress were veterans. Now it's less than 20%. So I think the lessons of the military that were instilled in all of these Americans did our society a whole lot of good. The bad or the wrong, we were in a war. We created a war. And there's no other word that I can come up with than create. We created the war that we were in, and then we didn't give the military the opportunity to win it. We were so political. I use the word we as all-inclusive. We were so political in the direction that we allowed the military to proceed that we ended up killing 58,000 Americans. So if we hadn't politicized the war and we went in to win it, then I would put that into the right column. But that wasn't the case.
Yeah. Well, your answer is pretty much along the same lines that most Vietnam veterans give today as we look. And of course, I said we have the benefit of 50 years of hindsight, which is...
We didn't learn a lot, though, did we?
Well, I'm not sure we did. I'm not sure we did. Our time is coming to a close, Colonel, and again, I want to thank you for your service to this country, and to thank you for coming down here and sharing your story with us, sir.
Well, I'm glad I had the opportunity.
Thank you, sir.